Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone. So today we will be starting with the next lecture, which is the part 3 of data collection methods, and today we will be discussing about biophysiological measurements, observations and few other techniques of data collection. I am Dr. Harmeet Kaur Kang from Chitkara University, Punjab. Before moving forward, let us see which all topics we will be covering today. We will be discussing about the biophysiological measurements, the types of these measurements, advantages and disadvantages. Then we will be discussing the observation, where we will be talking about units of observation, different types of observation, and how to develop the observation schedule. Then observation sampling techniques. And then we will be talking about other methods of data collection such as records, projective techniques, Q-sorts and vignettes. So let us start with the biophysiological measures first. As all of you know, nowadays majority of the nurses, they are getting involved in the clinical nursing research. And whenever we go for the clinical nursing research, many a times we need to assess the physiological processes or physiological measurements, and for that sometimes we need certain instruments and equipment. So these are particularly the biophysiological measures which we use in the collection of data for the quantitative research. So as I have already told you, that trend in nursing research has been towards increased use of measures to assess the physiologic status of the study participants and to evaluate the clinical outcomes. So the study participants, when they are the patients who are admitted in the hospital, and then we need to evaluate the clinical outcomes of the interventions which we are providing them when they are admitted in the hospital or when they are discharged, then usually we have to go for these physiological measurements. And setting in which nurses operate are typically filled with a wide variety of technical instruments for measuring the physiological functions. So as nurses, we work in the hospitals or in communities, and whenever we are taking care of the patients, we use number of equipments, number of instruments which are helpful in measuring the physiological functions. Then clinical nursing studies may involve specialized equipments and instruments, both for creating independent variable, for example an intervention using biofeedback equipment, and for measuring the dependent variable. So here we may use the equipments for creating the intervention. For example, sometimes we need to provide the intervention where we might be needing some equipments. For example, if we have to do the hemodynamic monitoring, we need to position the patient, and then we need to check the phlebostatic axis. So those positions can be based upon the phlebostatic axis, for which we might be needing certain instruments. And then also the biophysiological measurements are used for measuring the dependent variable, where the clinical outcomes of the patient, for example blood pressure, temperature or vital signs, or even blood levels of certain for example minerals, or certain renal function tests or liver function tests, or even lipid levels. So those are the dependent variables, or those are the health outcomes which we can assess through the use of the biophysiological measurements. Now, what are the purposes of biophysiological measurements? First one is basic physiological processes. So through the biophysiological measures, we can assess number of physiological processes, such as we can assess the blood pressure of the patient, we can assess the vital parameters of the patient, then certain blood levels of hormones, blood levels of any type of the physiological process. For example, for cardiac patients, we might be assessing the troponin I level, we might be assessing the LDH level. So number of physiological processes can be measured through the biophysiological measures. The example here I would like to give you is assessment of the level of cortisol in the blood among teenagers after playing violent video games. So the cortisol level assessment is a type of a biophysiological measurement. So after the violent video games, sometimes cortisol levels can go up because the stress levels go up, so that can be assessed through the biophysiological measurements. Another purpose is to assess the physiological outcomes of the nursing care. So many a times we keep on providing some interventions in the hospital, but we might not be knowing that what is the outcome of these interventions or the typical care guidelines or standard cares which we use in the hospital. So to assess that what are the positive or negative outcomes of those nursing care which we are every day doing, these physiological outcomes can be assessed through the biophysiological measurements, and which can be really useful for us to decide whether we need to continue those standard care procedures or not. For example, hemodynamic changes after manual lungs inflation in the patient with septic shock. So this is usual practice to provide the manual lung hyperinflation for the patients with the septic shock. But if we assess the hemodynamic changes, then it can give us the information about various side effects or various adverse effects, and then the policies can be changed whether this MLH has to be continued or it should be discontinued because of its adverse effects. Next one is the evaluation of the nursing interventions. So sometimes the new interventions we may need to decide, and to assess the effectiveness of those interventions, we may go for the biophysiological measurements, and that can provide us the information about whether that particular intervention was useful in improving something or not. For example, evaluation of effectiveness of music therapy on anxiety. So although anxiety can be assessed through other measures, for example, there are certain psychological tools available, instruments available which can be used, but it can also be assessed through the blood pressure and respiratory rate. As we all know that in anxiety, the blood pressure may shoot up and respiratory rate also goes up. So we can assess the anxiety through the biophysiological measurements also. Another purpose of biophysiological measurement is product assessment. So product assessment, sometimes we might be using some new equipments or new instruments, new products which can come in the hospital, and we want to know that what is the effect of these products. So for example, evaluation of heat loss prevention methods. We may assess the effectiveness of warm mattress and warm air inflatable blankets for the patients for whom we don't want the heat loss. So we can see that out of these products which one is better for heat loss prevention. So biophysiological measurements can be useful in certain levels of the product assessments also. Then measurement and diagnosis improvement. Sometimes in clinicals there are no standard policies that for how long the patient's measurements or patient's assessment has to be done, or whether the frequency should be more for assessments, and whether we are assessing the patient frequently, does it have any effect on the improvement in the clinical outcomes of the patient, or it helps in early identification of certain complications. So such type of studies can also be conducted where biophysiological measurements can be of really good use. So example I am here giving is effect of frequent blood pressure and temperature assessments on prognosis of the neurotrauma patients. So we can see, we all of us know that neurotrauma patients, their blood pressure and temperature has to be maintained, otherwise their intracranial pressure can go up. And we can do a study that if we are doing frequent blood pressure and temperature assessments, then based upon those assessments, then timely treatment can be given and it can result in better prognosis of the neurotrauma patient. So this is one example where biophysiological measurements can be really of good use to improve the clinical outcomes in the patients. Third one is studies of physiologic correlates. Many times we want to assess the relationship between the variables which are physiological processes, and then their relationship with the psychological outcomes in the patients. For example, here in the COPD patients, we can examine the relationship between functional performance, the physical activity of the person, their functional capacity, which can be assessed through the forced expiratory volume during the spirometry, and the symptom experiences in the patients with the chronic obstructive pulmonary disease patients. So how these biophysiological measurements or these variables are related to the symptom experiences in these patients. So such type of studies also need the biophysiological measurements. So there are number of purposes of the biophysiological measurements, and it can be used in a number of ways while we are conducting the clinical research studies. Now let us talk about the different types of the biophysiological measurements. First one is in vivo measurement. What is in vivo measurement? These are those which are performed directly in or on living organisms. For example, on our patients, we assess their blood pressure. Blood pressure can be assessed through non-invasive methods or invasive methods. We can assess the oxygen saturation, we can assess the body temperature, then spirometry, tidal volume. So all these types of the measurements are the examples of in vivo measurements. Another type of the biophysiological measurement is the in vitro measurement. In vitro measurement is that it is by contrast performed outside the organism's body. For example, we can take the blood sample. Blood sample can be sent to the lab, and in the lab we can assess the level of serum potassium concentration or level of any other mineral, or even renal function test or liver function test we can assess. Even the blood culture test, presence of any type of the infection which we check in the laboratory. So that particular measurements which are conducted in a lab are in vitro measurements. Now let us talk about that which all points we need to take care whenever we have to select a biophysiological measurement for our research study. Particularly nursing students may be unfamiliar with hundreds of biophysiological measurements which are available in institutional setting. So they should be knowing that what type of biophysiological measurement will be useful for their study, for which they should not have any problem to use. So they can take the help of the experts to decide that which particular biophysiological measurements will be useful for their research study. So whenever you have to select a biophysiological measurement, you have to consider certain questions. First one is that, is the equipment or laboratory analysis you need readily available to you? So if your study is such a study where you need some equipment or some laboratory analysis, then you need to see that whether in the hospital is it readily available to you, or if it is not available, can it be borrowed or rented or purchased? Next question then you have to ask that if equipment must be purchased, is it affordable? How costly is it? Will you be able to buy it? And whether funding can be acquired to cover the purchase. Maybe you can purchase or you can get it on rent, but whether funding is available for that. Third one is, can you operate the required equipment and interpret its results, or do you need training? So if you are having equipments available, then you need to see that whether you will be able to interpret. If not, then sometimes you might be needing some training to interpret the results. Then will you have difficulty obtaining permission to use the equipment for an institutional review board? Because all equipments may not be easy to handle and may not be easy to interpret. So institutional review board may not give the permission to use that equipment for your research study. So that also you need to think beforehand. Then does the measure need to be direct? For example, a direct measure of blood pressure by the way of arterial line. So you need to see whether you need to get the direct measurement only, or you can go for indirect, where we can go for the non-invasive methods also. So whenever you have to decide the biophysiological measurement, you need to see that it should not be harming the patient. So maybe you can decide whether to go for indirect or direct measurement of blood pressure or any other measure which you are going to use for your research study. Is continuous monitoring necessary? That also you need to see that whether you need the continuous monitoring, or in between one test a point in time measure is adequate. So sometimes, like, you may be needing in your research study that patient has to be continuously assessed through a cardiac monitor, or you have to take the continuous ECG of the patient, or sometimes only one time ECG might be all right for you. So that is very important to be decided beforehand. Do your activities during data collection permit you to record data simultaneously, or do you need an instrument system with recording equipment? So whether you will be recording it simultaneously, or you will be needing a recording equipment, or even a research assistant who can help you to record. Is a single measure of your dependent variable sufficient, or multiple measures? So whether you will be assessing only one time or many times. Are your measures likely to be influenced by reactivity? That also you need to see whether if you will be assessing your measurements, then whether if patient is aware, uh, whether your results will be influenced by that. So then you need to think about blinding and double blinding in your research study. Can your research variable be measured using a non-invasive procedure or an invasive procedure? So mostly as students, you should try to go for the non-invasive procedures, because it is difficult to get the ethical permission for the research studies where invasive procedures are required, because invasive procedures put a risk for the harm to the patient. So these questions you need to keep in mind while selecting a biophysiological measure. Now let us talk about the advantages of the biophysiological measure. If we talk about all the types of the data collection measures, biophysiological measurements are relatively accurate and precise. So because here you are using the instruments or equipments which give the accurate results, and usually those are sensitive and specific, so you get the precise and accurate results. And biophysiological measurements are objective because you can measure, and it gives you the objective measurements whenever you are using. These are the valid measures of the targeted variables. So because why we are saying valid measure means the measurement which is measuring the same thing for which it is made. So if we are talking about thermometers will be providing us only temperature, not blood volume. So it means these are really valid measures for the variables we are using it. And because equipment for obtaining biophysiological measurement is available in the hospital setting, the cost of collecting the biophysiological data may be low or non-existent. So because here mostly these equipments are available in the hospital, so if you get the administrative approval to use that for your research study, the cost can be non-existent or cost can be very low. Now, discussing about the disadvantages of biophysiological measures, most important disadvantages is that the measuring tool may affect the variable it is attempting to measure. For example, sometimes even whatever tool which you are using, it only can cause the change in the measurement. For example, the presence of sensing device. So sensing device, if or such as transducer, if it is inserted in a blood vessel, it can block. So because of the blockage, it can alter the pressure flow. So that can result in the wrong measurement. So we need to be knowing about all the types of the problems which can be encountered while using the biophysiological measurements, and we try to take care that those problems should not be there, and we should be getting the accurate measurements only. Second one is there are normally interferences that create artifacts in the biophysiological measures. So sometimes the interferences which are because of the machine only, because of the equipment only, can be causing the artifacts, and because of that we might be getting the wrong measurements. So here example is given that noise generated in a measuring instrument interferes with the signal being produced. So sometimes the noise which can be from the instrument only can be causing the change in the signal. So that can give you the wrong measurement. Another disadvantage from my own experience, I can tell you that sometimes the instrument which we are using, that its size, depending upon the person's body weight and person's age, may also be varying. So we need to be knowing that which particular equipment is useful for assessment in a particular age, or a particular type of weight of a person. Okay, so after biophysiological measurement, we will be moving forward to another type of the data collection method, that is observation. And observation is used a lot in the nursing studies. Research observation involves the systematic selection, observation and recording of the behaviors, events and settings relevant to a problem under study. So here we may be observing many things when we are working in the clinical area, but then we need to see from the research point of view what need to be observed. So it involves systematic selection. We need to select exactly what has to be observed, and then it has to be recorded properly. And recording of the behaviors, events and settings relevant to a problem under study should be taken care. Like self-report methods, observational methods include both structured and unstructured methods that primarily yield the qualitative or quantitative data. So unstructured methods are used for qualitative data, and structured methods are used for quantitative data. Now, which are the phenomena which are amenable to the observations? That we should know that which phenomena we can observe. First one is characteristics and conditions of the individuals. So we can observe number of characteristics and conditions. For example, a person who is coming to the hospital, you can assess their body build, their body structure, and even the gestures, person's emotional well-being, that can be assessed, that can be observed. Then is activities and behavior. We can observe number of activities and behavior, how the persons are behaving in certain situations. For example, if we are observing the pediatric patients, how the pediatric patients are behaving when they are in a hospital or any procedure is performed on them, whether they get anxious or they need the support of parents, or they feel all right when they are in hospital. So such all types of the behaviors can be observed, or certain activities, how the persons are performing certain activities in the clinical area. For example, we can observe the nurses, how they are taking care of a patient who is in ICU, or the hand washing, how many persons are going through all the steps of hand washing. So we can observe the activities and behaviors. Then is skill attainment and performance. So skill and attainment and performances can also be measured through the observation. For example, to a patient who is being discharged, a diabetic patient, and you have taught them how to give a insulin injection, then you can assess their skill of insulin injection through observation. You can ask them to perform, and then you can observe. And in the same way, like if we are doing a study on the nursing students or nurses on performance of certain procedures in the clinical area, then you can you can observe them that how they are performing that. For example, if we have taught a group of nurses cardiopulmonary resuscitation, how they are able to do, whether they are able to perform each and every step, that can be assessed through the observation. Then is verbal communication. How the nurses or doctors communicate with the patient, how the patients communicate with each other, or how the patients communicate with the doctors or nurses in the clinical area or in the other healthcare professionals. So such types of the verbal communications can be observed for a research study. Another thing is, if you are observing the patients or some general population in their homes or in a village, there also you can observe that what type of language they use to communicate certain behaviors. Then even non-verbal communication. So observation is very useful to assess the non-verbal communication also. Like whenever we are doing biophysiological measurements or we are doing the self-report, we usually do not take care of the non-verbal communication. But through observation, while collecting the data, we can even assess the gestures of the patient, we can assess the emotional state of the patient. So we can get the measurement or get the information about the non-verbal communication also through the observation. Then environmental characteristics. So observation gives us the opportunity to observe the environment in which you are collecting the data. Like if you have gone to the hospital, you can observe the hospital for the cleanliness, for the hygiene, and how the patient surroundings are set. And so you get an opportunity to observe the environment in a good way. Or if you are going and interviewing some person at home, then you can observe through the observation, you can document the condition of their home also, hygienic conditions, whether they are having their the house, how whether they are having environment where there is one or two persons only are living in a family, or 10 persons of the family are living in a area, and there are chances of spread of the communicable disease. So such particular phenomena where environment is also needed to be observed, that can be amenable to the observation. Now coming to the units of the observation. There are two approaches whenever we are talking about the unit of observation. First one is molar approach. So molar approach entails observing large units of the behavior and treating as a whole. So here we observe overall behavior, and that particular overall behavior we consider it as a whole. For example, if here I have given one example that psychiatric nurse researchers might study patients' mood swings. So patient can be observed for a whole day, and he can be observed for his verbal and non-verbal behaviors, and how these behaviors are changing into the aggressive behavior. So that as a whole, everything will be giving us the information about patients' mood swings. So here this is a molar approach where we are observing a large unit of the behavior, and that particular large unit of behavior we treat as a whole. But another approach is molecular approach. Molecular approach means Here we use the small and highly specific behaviors as observational unit. So here we do not go for whole observation. We go for the small and specific behaviors which we observe from our research point of view. So maybe we can take each movement of a person or each action or gesture or phrase. It is treated as a separate entity rather than considering it as a whole. So here we do not try to relate the things with each other. We try to observe everything as a separate entity. But many a times in molecular approach, because we are considering everything as a separate entity, we may not get in-depth information about a specific behavior. Now let us talk about the observed and observer's relationship, particularly from the research point of view. So the two aspects of the issue concerns are intervention and concealment. So we should be knowing that intervention and concealment are very important aspects whenever we are talking about the relationship between the observer and the observed. So first one is intervention. Observational studies may involve an experimental intervention which deals with the experimental design. So many times we introduce some intervention and then we observe the patient's outcome after that intervention. So, for example, a nurse researcher may observe the patient's post-operative behaviors after an intervention designed to improve patient's ability to cough and breathe after surgery. So here intervention has been provided, and then after the intervention then you are observing whether there is any improvement in patient's condition or not. But sometimes we may not be able to introduce the experimental intervention, but we have to observe something which is occurring naturally. So sometimes, however, observational researchers intervene to structure a research setting called direct setting without introducing an experimental treatment. It means without manipulating the independent variable. So here we are not introducing any experimental intervention, but certain in a naturalistic setting, certain activities which can result in certain behaviors can be observed. For instance, researchers sometimes stage a situation to provoke the behaviors. So in a natural setting, if you want to see that if a certain activity is conducted, what type of behavior will be shown by the persons. So then they need to stage a particular situation, and then they have to see that how the others are behaving in that. But certain activities are rare in naturalistic setting and making it inexpedient to wait for them to happen, because if you want to assess that what is the bystander's intervention in case of the sexual harassment, so that may not happen in front of you. It will be very difficult for you to observe the thing to happen and then to assess that how the bystanders will be behaving. So in that case, in a naturalistic setting, you may stage a situation of sexual harassment, and then you can see that what type of provocation of the behaviors by the bystanders, or what type of behavior the bystanders will be showing in that. Another one is concealment. So concealment is that how much participants are aware of the observation and their role in a study. Whether the participants know that they are part of a research study, or it is concealed from them and they do not know that they are part of the study. So that you need to decide that how much awareness the participants should be having that they are part of the research study. So in a naturalistic setting, researchers are sometimes concerned that their presence, if known, would alter the behavior under observation. So it happens if person whom you are observing, if they know that they are part of the research, they may alter their behavior. So you may have to think of alternatives where you can conceal, or they should not be aware that they are part of a research study. Third thing is that behavioral distortions that result from the known presence of observer are reactive measurement effectivity or reactivity. So this distortion which they bring in their behavior, that is known as reactivity. And reactivity can be eliminated if observations are made without people's knowledge through some type of the concealment. But total concealment, however, is difficult to attain except in formal or highly active observational settings. So usually it is not easy to conceal because people will get to know that somebody is observing. But yes, in an area where it is a very active type of a area, for example in hospital, people are usually busy in providing the care, or patients are coming in a hospital in OPD. So if you will be sitting in a one corner, people may not know that you are observing them. So their concealment is possible. But in certain situation where few people are there and they are doing something, usually they will get to know, and there is no possibility of the total concealment. And concealed observation without the knowledge and consent of those observed is ethically problematic also. It is not ethically right that you are observing something without their knowledge. So that also have to be considered. Now let us talk about different types of the observations. So there are four types of the observation. Number one is no concealment and participant observation. Second one is concealment and participant. Then concealment and non-participant, and then no concealment and non-participant. So let us talk about all these four types of the observations one by one. First one is no concealment and participant observation. Here the observer makes no alteration in the social setting. So observer is not making any alteration in the social setting. How it is happening in the natural setting or social setting, things will be observed in the same way, and does not observe covertly. So here concealment is not there. There is no concealment. And subjects are aware of researcher's presence. So they know that researcher is present and he is observing, but they do not know that what exactly the researcher is observing. So they are not aware of researcher's underlying motives. And here the researcher is part of the group. As a part of the group, the researcher observes the people. They know that researcher is the part of their group and he is working with them, but whether the researcher is observing for them for his research study, that is not known to them. But here drawbacks are Hawthorne effect. Hawthorne effect is that if people get to know that they are being observed, then automatically their certain outcomes might be better. So because subjects are aware that they are being observed. So this is one drawback which can be there. Second thing is interaction between observed and observer alters the subject's behavior. So many a times, because researcher is the participant, sometimes when he is interacting with the subject, so they may alter their behavior, and it can result in the wrong information, and it can decrease the validity of the research findings of the research study. Second type of observation is concealment and participant observation. So concealment means here the subjects are not knowing that they are being observed, and the researcher is the participant of the group. So researcher observes subjects' behavior in their natural setting but adopts a passive role, as otherwise it may alter subjects' behavior. So researcher is the part of the group, and he observes their behavior in their natural settings. And researcher observes and records observation with minimum intervention, and researcher observes whatever he observes, he will be recording. And the problem of behavior distortion with the presence of observer is known as reactive measurement effect. So sometimes researcher may be the participant and he is concealing, but still if they get an idea that they are being observed, they may change their behavior, and this type of the problem distortion is known as a reactive measurement effect or reactivity. Another part is concealment and non-participant observation. So here researcher makes observation from the periphery of a social setting in such a way that he is present but does not interact with others. So maybe like I gave you one example that in a OPD, how the patients are coming and how they are behaving with the health professionals, that can be observed, or how the health professionals are communicating with the patients can be observed. While sitting in a OPD on a corner, a researcher can sit and he can keep on observing. And observer does not make his intentions known. So observer can be taken as a, OPD. If he is sitting, the people can think that he is somebody's relative, or he is a patient who is waiting for his turn, and he can simply keep on observing. And observer does not make his intention known to the group, nor does he make any effort to participate. He will just sit and keep on observing. And through this method, the researcher can collect great deal of information just by sitting at one side. By not participating, he can just observe and keep on documenting. If observer is not nearby, difficulty in hearing can lead to misunderstanding. So sometimes if observer is not nearby and he is not able to listen that what type of communication is going on between the people he is observing, then sometimes it can lead to misunderstandings. And question of violation of human rights is always there, whether it is ethical to observe the people when they are not knowing. So lack of dignity in data collection is there, because the observed are neither aware of the observer nor being observed. So they do not know that somebody is sitting there who is observing them. Another type of the observation is no concealment and non-participant observation. This is mostly used in the nursing research, and it is extremely valuable in nursing research. And usually it is used in the interventional studies, where we provide the intervention and we take the consent beforehand. Voluntarily the subjects participate in the interventional studies, and then we take the measurement or assess or observe the person for the improvement in their health outcomes. And here because there is no concealment, so they know, the subjects, they know that observers are there and they are assessing them. So subjects are aware of their participation in the study and they know that they are being observed. Now let us talk about the observation sampling technique. How can you sample that which particular event or at what time you have to observe? So usually impossible to observe the behavior for extended periods. So it is not possible to observe each and everything for a long period of time, because it will add to the fatigue and boredom. So that is why always observational samplings should be used, where you can decide that which particular thing has to be observed. So commonly used techniques are time sampling method and event sampling method. So let us talk about the time sampling first. It involves a selection of time periods during which observation will take place. So for this, the researcher decides beforehand that at what time and for what duration he will be observing. So researcher should decide duration and time, when to begin and when to stop. Another type is event sampling. Event sampling refers to a diverse class of specific empirical methods for studying individual experiences and social processes within their natural spontaneous context. So event sampling is, they have to see that which particular type of social processes the person will be assessing. So out of the whole, like if you are observing somebody whole day, then out of that, which particular events are useful for your research study, those events you can consider for your research study. So event sampling procedures are designed to obtain reasonably detailed accounts of thoughts, feelings and behaviors as they occur in everyday. So in everyday life you can observe, but then out of that, the certain types of the thoughts or feelings and behaviors you can be using for your research study. Now what is the difference between the time and event sampling? Time sampling is when you set a designated amount of time. Means you decide beforehand that for this much duration you will be observing and at this time you will be observing. For example, you can decide that for 30 seconds a person will be observed, and what behavior is happening in these intervals, that behavior you will be recording at the regular and preset interval. And event sampling is that watching all the time. You are observing the person all the time, and you will be marking down when the specific behavior is happening. So here for continuous period of time you will be observing, but then if a specific behavior which is useful for your research study, that you will be documenting once that will be happening in the natural setting. So this is the difference between the time sampling and the event sampling. Now let us talk about developing the observation schedule. So whenever we need to particularly go for the quantitative research study and where we are using the observation technique, you have to determine the focus questions to be answered beforehand. That what are the research questions which you want, for which you want the information. So then you will be selecting the aspects of the behaviors to be observed. So depending upon your variables under study, you will be seeing that what type of behaviors you will be observing. Whether you will be observing the certain sign and symptoms of the patient after some intervention, or you will be assessing the behavior of a person for whole day. So that you need to decide that which aspect of the behavior you have to observe for the research study. Third one is defining the behavior that fall within a category. So depending upon your questions, which type of the behaviors will be falling in the category for your research study, that you have to decide. Then you will be designing a system for data collection. Then based upon that, sometimes you might be designing a checklist that you will be observing the person for these steps, whether he is following or not. And particularly it is better that if we can design a observation schedule, so that if anybody is observing, everybody should be observing in a same way. So it is better to design a checklist or the steps or the different areas or different behaviors which need to be observed. Then you need to prepare the recording sheets and checklists, and observation guides can be there, that which type of the interactions or processes or behaviors you will be observing. Observation guide is useful when there is more than one person who will be observing, so that the difference in observation should not be there. Then you will be preparing, while you will be observing, then you will be preparing the field notes where you will be documenting all the processes or events which has happened during your observation. And you will be selecting the sites and you will select the observers. Then you will also see whether you will be training the observers or not, because if you have to observe certain complex behaviors, then you need to train the observers that in what way they have to observe, so that there should not be any discrepancy in the observation if more than one person is observing. Then you need to quantify the observations. So whatever observations you have done, usually the checklists are formed in a way that you can quantify in the end, so that it can be amenable to the statistical procedures and you can get the results in a numeric form. So you can decide it beforehand that how you will be quantifying, if you have prepared the checklist, or otherwise afterwards you can quantify the observations. Then developing the procedures to facilitate the recording. Then you have to test the observation schedule. So once you have developed the observation schedule, then you need to test. So it can be tested in two ways. You can go for the inter-rater reliability, where if two observers are observing, then you need to go for the inter-rater reliability. Inter-rater reliability means consistency in observing something by two persons. So there should be at least 85% of agreement between two observers or raters. So if you are having some checklist, then based upon that you can tick, one person can observe and another person can observe, and they can document their findings independently, and then after that we can assess the agreement. Another thing is intra-rater reliability. Intra-rater reliability is used when the same rater is observing. So what we can do is that the same person can observe at two or more occasions, and then we can assess that whether at both the occasions he was able to observe in a same way or not. So it involves the multiple observations extended over days and weeks, and this is known as retest reliability, where the same person is observing at more than 2 occasions, and then we will be recording those particular observations, and then we can assess the reliability or agreement between those observations. So these are the methods of testing the observation schedule, whether our observation schedule is reliable or not, and it should always be conducted, because otherwise there will be the changes in the observations. Now let us talk about the advantages of the observation. Observation is an important technique for studying the human behavior, specifically where interventions are used. So particularly in nursing studies, we conduct number of interventions, and observation is a very good method to assess the human behavior after those interventions. It provides a depth and variety of information. So through observation we can assess or observe number of things. We can assess the verbal, non-verbal behaviors, activities. So we can get the in-depth information about any phenomena through observation. And researcher is not dependent upon subjects who consent to answer. All subjects are potential respondents. So if a researcher is going to a setting and he is observing, so he may not have to take the consent of individual persons. He may go and sit and keep on observing everybody. So all the subjects who will be there in that setting will be becoming automatically the potential respondents. Then subjects are usually available, unlike questionnaire, where one is dependent upon return of the mailed questionnaire. So here there is no chance of the missing information, or no chance that somebody will not be giving you the information. If you are observing something, you will be documenting everything, and you can document for each and every subject. It allows view of complete situation firsthand and includes sequence of events. So here we can document while observing that what happened first, and then secondly what happened. So we can completely get an information about that what particular behavior can provoke the another behavior, and what is the sequence of events. So we can get in-depth information about any phenomena through this. Another advantage is that all the data obtained by the observation are usable, unlike questionnaire. So where irrelevant information may be included because respondents misunderstand the question asked to them. So in observation, researcher or observer knows that what has to be observed. So whatever data he collects while observing will be really useful for the research study, whereas in questionnaires there might be sometimes if respondents have not understood some question, then we may be getting some irrelevant information, whereas in observation every type of data which we observe and document will be usable for our research study. Then it is most open to use of recording devices such as tape recorders and cameras, and we can even record, like we can use video recording, we can use audio recorders, so and which can be used afterwards also to make out the meaning out of those behaviors, or make out the meaning out of those narratives which you have recorded during observation. And one can make use of assistants to carry out observations. So if you have trained the observers or assistants, and you have developed a structured type of observation schedules, then you can use the assistants also, and you can get the reliable information through those assistants even. Now let us talk about the disadvantages of the observation. Now observation and interpretation is a demanding task, so you need to know that what exactly you will be observing, and plus you need to be attentive while observing. Your sensation, perception and conception has to be really good. So it is a demanding task, and everybody may not be a good observer. Then lack of consent to be observed. This is the important problem with the observation, that if you are using concealment, then it is not ethically right, because you are not taking consent of the people whom you are observing. Then time and duration of event can't be predicted usually, and observer may wait until an event happens. So particularly in the natural settings, if you have to wait for certain event to happen, then you don't know when it will be happening. Maybe you may start observing in the morning till evening, the same event may not happen. So you may need to observe for long periods to just see a event happening. So therefore it is difficult to know when to present to observe key events. So it is usually very difficult to know that when that particular event will be happening, and it can be really sometimes tiring for the observers. Then data obtained are vulnerable to many distortions and biases, because observers' biasness can always be there. So observed events are subjected to researchers' cultural backgrounds and interpretation. So researchers or observers' own judgments can cause the distortions in the observations and biases, because whatever the researcher is observing, he will be documenting, but the way he will be documenting, the meaning making out of those observations or interpretations which he is making out of those observations may be vulnerable to distortions and biases of the researcher. Then use of recording devices is expensive. So particularly for research data, many a times the researchers are asked to record, but to record through videos and cameras is usually very expensive. And extensive training is necessary if assistant observers are used. So this is very important, that if more than one person is observing a research data, then you need to train them fully, and you have to have the structured guidelines what to observe. Another disadvantages are that observers may get involved in the situation which can cause threat to the objectivity of data collected. So particularly if the observer is a participant observer, then he may get involved in the situation. So if he gets involved, then the objectivity of the data can be affected, because he may get emotional, or he may get involved in the emotional situation or other situations, so where he may not be collecting the data without biasness. Then especially rating scales are susceptible to two distinct types of the errors, that is halo effect. So if we are using the rating scale, then it can cause certain types of the errors. One thing is halo effect, that is tendency of the rater to be influenced by one characteristics in rating other non-related characteristics. For example, if researcher has to observe something, and after observing he has to rate the subject whom he is observing, then sometimes halo effect can be there, where if a researcher or observer likes the other person, then irrespective of the way the person has behaved in that particular situation, he may give them good rating only. So this is known as the halo rating, means based on the previous impression of that person, the researcher or the observer may rate the person in a positive way or negative way. Then error of leniency. Sometimes some observers have the tendency to rate everything positively, so that is known as error of leniency. So if they are using the rating scales, they may rate everybody with good marks only, they may rate everybody positively only. Then is error of severity. Contrast to that, there are the people who might be always rating harshly, so they might give marks, or they may rate the persons very low even though they might be performing really good. So these are some of the problems with the rating scales when we are observing. Now we should also consider the ethical points while using the observation as a research data collection technique. First one is voluntary participation. Observation without participants' permission may not assume subjects' voluntary participation. So if participants do not know and permission or consent has not been taken, so it means you have not got the participants' voluntary participation. So that is ethically wrong. Second thing is freedom from physical or psychological harm and distress. So this is very important that observer, whenever he is observing, it is better that he should take their voluntary participation. Otherwise, sudden disclosure of being observed, if persons get to know that they were being observed, that may cause the distress and mental trauma to some subjects. So that should be taken care, because then it is not ethically right if they are psychologically harmed and they are under distress. Then anonymity must be ensured. So sometimes researchers, when they are observing, they may know that what was being done by any subject, and if they use that information for defaming that person, then that is really ethically wrong. So whenever you are documenting after observing something, you are documenting the behavior of some people, you should always maintain the confidentiality, or name of the person should not be documented. Now, how to record the observation data? So observation data can be recorded in the form of checklists. Like I already told you that for recording the data, we may have the checklist where the steps are written, and then you can observe like it has been done yes or no, or you can rate it from 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. So that can be used to record the data, which can be really easy to quantify afterwards. Sometimes field records can be used, so where the researcher keep on recording the events which has happened, but it is not possible for the observer to record it there in the field only. He may, once he has observed, then he can go back and he can record whatever happened. Then logs is particularly a list of events which has happened. So field record is a elaborated record, whereas in logs we can just document that this has happened now, or sequence of events which has happened. Then reflective notes are that observer is observing, at the same time he is interpreting and writing in his own language, so that is known as a reflective note. So reflective note can also be written by the researcher. He can usually the field records are used or something is audio taped or recorded through the video, and then the observer observe it, and then he writes the reflective notes about whatever he has observed. Okay, so with this the observation technique is over. Now let us talk about the other techniques of data collection. So very important type of the technique which we often use in our nursing study are records, documents and available data. So whenever we need to conduct a research study, many times we use the records which are available to us. Like in hospital, we have patients' records available. We have patients' documents with us, which can also be used as the method of data collection. So records and written documents can be an excellent source for the research data. For example, patients' charts, physicians and nurses' orders, care plan statements and shift reports constitute rich data sources. So many times in our nursing researches, we use these records as our research data. In addition to medical and nursing records, hospitals maintain financial records, sometimes financial records, personal records, nutrition records, and so many other records can also be used for our research study. The most salient advantage of record is that they are economical. Now, why they are economical? Because these are easily available to us, and we don't have to collect the primary data. Whichever is already available, the records, we can use those. And the collection of the original data is often time consuming and costly. So because here we are not collecting the original data, we are using the record as our data for our research study. So these are really economical. And pre-existing records also permit an examination of trend over time. Plus we can get to know that if based upon the patient's record, if we are seeing, or hospital record, we are seeing that patient's stay in the hospital is changing. Maybe earlier the stay of a particular patient was for longer period, then through the records we get to know that over 1 year the length of stay has been decreased. So it gives us about the trends over the time. We can get to know whether the outcomes in the patients is improving in a hospital over time, or it is deteriorating. So this can be really useful to examine the trends over time. Two major sources of bias in record is selective deposit and selective survival. So selective deposit is that sometimes all the records are not kept in the hospital and you may not get all the records. Or selective survival also. Selective survival means maybe records might be deposited, but once you started retrieving the records, you may not get that particular record, and whatever records are available, with that only you get document the findings of your result, your research study. So that means your research studies findings will not be valid because you have not observed each and everything which has to be observed according to your research study. Another problem confronting the researcher is the increasing reluctance of institutes to make the records available for the study. So it is very difficult to get the records from any institutions because usually they are not happy to provide the records. So it becomes very difficult to get the administrative approval for getting the permission to record, get the records for a research study. Another type of the data collection is projective technique. Projective techniques are also used in a research study where participants are presented with the stimulus of low structure, permitting them to read in their own interpretation, and in this way provide researcher with information about their way of thinking. So in projective technique, something the researcher may give the subjects to read something and they can interpret in their own way, and they can be asked some questions that how they perceive that particular thing and or what do they think about that. So it may give free play to participants' imagination by providing them with tasks that permit an almost unlimited variety of responses. And responses that are typically in narrative form but that are sometimes quantified. It can be so whenever we are asking the questions, it can be open-ended question or it can be a closed-ended question. So we can either get the information in narrative form or in the quantified form also. There are different types of the projective technique. One is pictorial projective technique. In this, for example, in the various psychological tests, we use the pictorial projective technique, where like you might have heard regarding ink blot test, where with the ink certain pictures originate and the persons are shown those pictures, and then he is asked that what does he think after seeing this particular picture, and person has to explain that what is he thinking about that particular picture, and through that we can assess the personality of a person. So this is a typical type of a projective technique which is used through the picture. Another is thematic appreciation test also, that can be used to assess the personality of a person. Another type of the projective technique is verbal projective technique. Verbal projective technique present participants with an ambiguous verbal stimulus. So here the stimulus provided is a type of a verbal sentence. So it can be of different forms. One is word association method. It presents the participants with a series of words to which they respond with first thing that comes to their mind. For example, you can ask them you can give them a word tree, and then you ask them that after listening this particular word tree, what comes in their mind first, and they can explain that. Second is sentence completion. You can give them a sentence and the person has to complete that particular sentence, and person is given a set of incomplete sentence and asked to complete them in any desired manner. So incomplete sentence can be given and person has to complete. Like for example, you can ask them that nowadays I am feeling good because, so the persons can express in their own language whatever they are feeling about that. Then is expressive methods. These techniques encourage self-expression in most cases through the construction of some product out of the raw material. So we may provide them some raw material and they may have to express themselves through number of techniques. They may form some collage, they may prepare some pictures or anything through the raw material, and they can express whatever expression or whatever feelings they are having. So examples of these projective technique is like a TAT type picture include, we may assess that what type of parent-child relationship is going on, what type of creativity the person is having, or what is their attitude towards authority, or whether they are having the fear of success, And some examples of the incomplete sentences include like, when I think of a nurse, I feel, and person has to give the information. Then thing I most admire about nurses is. The major expressive methods are play techniques or drawing and painting and role playing. So through expressive methods, they can express their feelings. Another very important type of the data collection method is Q sorts. So what is Q sort? It was introduced in 1935 by William Stephenson, and usually here there are 40 to 50 cards, and uh, participants are asked to sort the cards into one of the 5 columns. So we provide them the 5 columns and they have to read every card, and based upon that they can sort the cards in the 5 columns, and quality of each column are then recorded, and results are used to assist the patients in determining issues he or she wishes to work in treatment. So you may ask them something like, for example, if you are talking about their day-to-day problems, so the person may have to be sorting the cards in from 1 to 5 columns, and then he can, what is the least important problem which you are feeling, and what is the most important problem which you are feeling nowadays, and then the person can sort the cards accordingly. And subject asked to sort statements into piles according to the importance to subject, or most positive to the least positive. Forced choice arrangement distribute into piles of the bell-shaped curve, and they are asked that in the center you have to put more cards, then surrounding areas have to be less cards, so that you can get a bell-shaped curve. So sometimes forced choice arrangement also they have to distribute, then there they have to really think that which card has to go where, and which can give us the information that through which particular type of psychological problems they are going through. Time consuming and difficult for some respondents. Some respondents really feel it difficult, particularly if the forced choice arrangement they feel difficult. And it is a ranking of the variables presented as statements printed on small cards. So these small cards, they will have some statements. The person has to read those cards, and after reading they have to sort the cards. For example, in a Q study of people's view of a nursing, a subject might be given statements like, it is deeply noble profession. Another card might be that it is altruistic in nature, or another card may show that it is submissive, and asked to sort them from most like how I think about this profession to least like how I think about this profession. So the persons may have to sort the cards accordingly. The use of ranking rather than asking subjects to rate their agreement with statements individually is meant to capture the idea that people think about ideas in relation to other ideas rather than in isolation. So we usually don't want that for everything they have to give separate, like for example in Likert scales we get for each and every statement the separate type of the response, but here we are asking them to put some ideas together in one column. So that will give us the information that how a particular idea is related to the another idea. So this is an example of the Q sort. So here you can see these are the small cards where the information is written, and based upon the written material the person has to sort the cards, and here it is a forced choice arrangement. The person has to choose the cards and they have to arrange in a particular way. So where bell shaped forced choice arrangement has to be made, and you can see this is least important consideration and most important consideration, and the person has to sort the cards accordingly. Coming to the another type of the data collection method, that is vignettes. Vignettes are brief description of events or situations to which respondents are asked to react. So researcher can give them certain situations, they can provide some situations and they can describe those situations, and based upon that situations then you can ask the respondents perception or opinion or what is their knowledge upon that. So that is the vignettes, and the question posed to the respondents after the vignettes may be either open-ended, so you can ask them how would you recommend handling this situation. So after providing the situation you can ask them open-ended question that how would you recommend handling this situation, or close-ended that on a scale below rate how well you believe the nurse handled the situation. The number of vignettes included in a study normally range from 4 to 10. So with this, the different types of the data collection are over. Let us summarize today's lecture. Biophysiological measurements can be classified as either in vivo, those performed within or in living organism like blood pressure and measurements, or in vitro measurements. So in vitro, those are performed outside the organism bodies. For example, we conduct number of blood tests in the laboratory. Then biophysiological measurements have the advantage of being objective, accurate and precise, because these provide us really specific information and accurate information, but care must be taken in using such measures with regard to practical, technical and ethical considerations. So that has to be taken care. And observational methods are techniques for acquiring research data through the direct observation and recording of phenomena. And researchers focus on different units of observations, which we have talked about, that there are two approaches, molar approach and molecular approach. Molar approach entails observation of large segments of behaviors as integral unit, whereas molecular approach treats small specific actions as separate entities. Then concealed observation we have talked about, where people are unaware that they are being observed, and it is done to reduce the reactivity so that people should not distort their behavior. And observation tend to become more focused over time, ranging from descriptive observation, broad observation, to focused observation of more carefully selected events or interaction, then to selective observation designed to facilitate the comparisons. And logs of daily events and field notes are major methods of recording the unstructured observational data, and field notes are both descriptive and reflective. Then existing records and documents provide an economical source, because these are readily available, and two major potential sources of biases which we have talked about are selective deposit and selective survival, where we may not get all the records available for studying a particular phenomena. Then Q sorts we talked about, in which people sort a set of card statements into piles according to specified criteria and can be used to measure the attitude, personality and other psychological traits. And projective techniques, we have talked that these are the data collection methods that rely on people's projection of psychological traits in response to vaguely structured stimuli. So we provide some structured stimuli, and based upon that then we can see that what is the person's opinions or feelings or knowledge about that. Then vignettes are brief description of an event or situation, so where we provide the events or situation to the person and person is asked to react, where they can give their own opinions or their perceptions about that particular situation. So with this, this lecture is over, and these are the books which I have used to prepare this PPT. This is Paulette and Beck Nursing Research Principles and Methods, and Paulette and Beck Essentials of Nursing Research, Appraising Event for Nursing Practice. So with this, our data collection method part 3 is over, where we have talked about biophysiological measurements and observation and other methods of data collection. Now we will be meeting in the next lecture. Thank you. Have a nice day.